looking. It's interesting. So when I was thinking about a premise for this talk, I was thinking that, we've been doing a little bit of work in this space, but viewability is really not a topic that we've been hearing too much about in recent, right? It's an old topic, came out, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And really, it's kind of been a thing where agencies have kind of checked the box on it. We've moved past it, right? We've moved to a lot more innovative things. So I wanted to take a step back and really look at this. And one thing that we're really looking at when we think about our advertising is that as much as we are, here at the Data and Programmatic Summit, the consumer really doesn't care about your tech stack, right? They don't care that you have a clean supply chain. They don't care that you have perfect data. They don't care that you have a DCO with a DMP and all of this different technology. What they really care about is the brand, right? The brand, the creative, and what speaks to them. So I think it's interesting when we think about what's going on, especially as we look at consumers and brands and how they interact, is really how can we make sure that our media is in the right place so that consumers actually pay attention to our creative. So I know it's a Data and Programmatic Summit, but we got to think about creative as well. Green button. There we go. Really quick background. What is Asics Digital? We are a subsidiary of Asics Corporation. Asics Corporation is a 70-year-old sneaker brand founded in Japan, actually. It was actually founded post-World War II with our founder was trying to reinvigorate the Japanese youth post-World War II. So it wasn't a big cash grab. It was really just to kind of reinvigorate the youth of the Japanese culture, which I think is a little bit unique. We have 3 major brands under the umbrella. So we have Asics, which is predominantly performance running shoes. We have Onitsuka Tiger, which is what I'm wearing today, more lifestyle shoe. And then we have Haglofs, which is a Swedish outdoor company, think like a Patagonia, very limited in Europe. Asics Digital specifically was founded through the acquisition of Runkeeper. So Runkeeper is one of the first 30 apps in the App Store. It's a run tracking software. And during that time, all the big companies, right, Under Armour, Nike, they were all kind of buying up these players. It's a great data source. So that's where we started. But since then, we've really grown and evolved. We went from a 40-person team to over 150 right now. And we're really driving digital innovation for the entire Asics Corporation. Really what that means is that we're handling things like e-commerce platforms. We're handling loyalty, membership, paid media, all the different consumer touch points, digital consumer touch points, we're trying to push. And so our team is really, the goal is to enable our regional teams. So Asics America or Asics Japan, the actual selling organizations, we try to enable them to drive success. So why is this still a thing? Why is viewability a topic or even in a session title in 2019? The IAB came out with their most updated standards, I think, in 2014. So again, very old topic. But before we jump in, can I do a quick raise of hands? How many people here are actively working with an independent measurement partner? 1, 2, 3. Okay, handful. How many of those brands do you guys have an internal mandate or an internal target that you guys are trying to push for things like fraud, viewability, brand safety? Okay. And then are any of you guys actually using this type of data as well to inform future creative or planning and strategy? Okay, cool, yeah. So I think we're going to go through a couple examples of how we're using this as Asics. So we're starting with this granular, data point, viewability, but really expanding much more to that. I know there's a lot more cool topics we could be talking about, right? A lot of this we talked about today. We have machine learning, we have AI, we have personalization, and we have more challenging topics too, right? Data fraud, I think that was a big piece yesterday from the Emoto team. Never really thought about the same fraud in the data space, so that's really interesting. We have privacy regulation, we have all sorts of things going on. So I want to take a step back and really quickly address why it's still a thing, at least for us. So it's an old topic, right? And agencies have been mastering this for a while. But when we think about our global benchmarks, what we see globally, and not just US, this is from Moat's, this is from Moat, their Q2 benchmark. We still see across display extremely low viewability percentages. We see 57% on desktop, 54% on mobile, and not that much better in video. 67% desktop video, 57% on mobile. So again, it's an old topic, right? We kind of beat the dead horse, but it's still costing advertisers millions of dollars a year purely on wasted media that was never seen. I'm of the mindset that if the ad wasn't seen, there's no way it can have an impact on our consumer. I know that might be a little controversial. There's been some talks earlier today or this week how performance still works even if you have very low viewability. I'm happy to talk about that later. And I also want to address two things. One, just because we're talking about viewability today does not mean this is kind of the core component of our optimization, right? This is not the most important factor. I know there's a lot of issues. And two is I'm not pushing for 100% viewability across the board and, fear-mongering that viewability is the end-all, be-all. So I just want to make sure that's very clear. So outside of the millions of dollars that advertisers are currently spending on non-viewable media, it comes to our second point, which I think has been discussed very well during this conference, and it's in terms of the data. I'm not going to belabor this point too much. I think there's been a lot of discussions, good discussions and talks on this data, but what it boils down to is crap in, crap out, right? If you're doing MTA or if you're doing manual optimization or manual insight development, how certain are you that the insights you're gleaning from that data set, how confident are you that that's the right insight if 50% of your ads were never seen? So that kind of goes into it. Also, MTA solutions, right? They're ingesting all sorts of log-level data from the ad server. Some may be ingesting also viewability percentages, but I haven't seen one that actually does that very well. And lastly, the walled gardens. We use an independent measurement solution very well. I think it's very helpful to level the playing field across the different walled gardens, right? If you ask 3 different video vendors what their definition of a video view is, you're probably going to get 4 or 5 different answers, right? Facebook kind of changes their video metrics every month. Sometimes with little notice, we have 10-second bind, 2-second, view through or play through now. But really, we like to use one independent tool that sits across all of our different channels and different platforms to really understand the equal metrics. I also like that I was Googling walled gardens, but this is a pretty good one. If you can see at the very top, you see Orkut still around. So this is from 2008. And it's funny to see that, walled gardens has been a thing for a long time. Nothing new here. So these are some of the reasons we think viewability is important. And so when I started my job here at Asics about 2 years ago, originally my task was to really get the lay of the land. What's going on across all of our different regions? Pre-2015, Asics was operated very autonomously. So what's going on in Asics Japan is very different from Asics Europe. Asics Australia is very different, again, and very little in-house capabilities or in-house understanding at a global level. So very quickly, we went out and we kind of audited all different types of things of media. And when we think about our independent measurements, so for viewability, brand safety, fraud, we saw that we really didn't have a solid grasp or a cohesive grasp globally. We had some regions, right, Asics Europe, Asics America, were using built-in tools via their DSPs, right, like an IAS or a DV plugged in. A lot of regions were unfortunately not leveraging an independent tool at all for this. And so what we saw is we need to consolidate all of these different regions, and not just to kind of monitor our viewability and fraud, but really also to start to compare the different performance across regions. So like any ex-agency guy, I went out and RFP'd a bunch of vendors, had them do a lot of the work and a lot of the research to come back to us, and we settled on Moat as our partner. They were a strong strategic partner for us, especially with their global presence, given our global presence. And so we operate this partnership right now in 7 different regions, as you can see here, which spans over 35 different market offices. And at any one time, we'll have 10 to 15 different media buying agencies working on our behalf somewhere across the world. So it's pretty messy. It's really helpful to have one solid tool that goes across everyone. So we implemented Moat. We implemented it. We plugged it into our DSPs. We plugged it into our ad server. We plugged it in all social profiles. But we didn't tell the regions really what we were doing with it. We didn't tell them a mandate. We didn't say, hey, you got to work on your viewability. Hey, you got to keep fraud in check. Really what we wanted to do is just build a foundational data set of where we're at today. And this was a few months ago. So where we're at today, and really just understand what is the Asics baseline for things like viewability, fraud, brand safety, et cetera. So I was pretty nervous. From the agency side, I've stood up similar independent measurement solutions on a new client before, and sometimes the data is pretty ugly at the start. But what we saw was actually pretty exciting. What you see here is all the different regions that were in our initial pilot. So you have Japan, Canada, Australia, EMEA, APAC. And then we're looking at the industry benchmark, right? This 56% viewability. And again, this was exciting, right? I was harping to my senior executives that this is this big bad topic, that our performance has been tanking for years, right? Like, we really have to understand this. And I was actually pretty shocked, and I was pleasantly surprised. And sure, we see Japan has some work to do, but overall, I was happy. This was me. I was happy. We're saving money, right? We're not wasting a bunch of money on fraud. We're not wasting a bunch of money on viewability. Looking good, sitting on cash. But then we dug in deeper, and then my attitude changed pretty quickly, and then I ended up looking like this. While the top line viewability was great, well, above industry standard, right? We're doing better than average, I guess. We had to think about two things. One, again, the industry average isn't that high, right? 56%, so 45 cents of every dollar you spend is going to waste. Not a great thing to kind of champion. But two, and this is where it's most important, I think, is the more we dug in, right? We unpeeled that layer of dig deeper after the top line viewability. We then started to come up with a lot of interesting insights and learnings that we're going to go through today. And so this is really where we start with viewability, but then we dig in much deeper into more of the attention metrics and understand, what are the lessons we can learn to drive future media and creative strategy. Which leads us to our first big learning, right? It's nothing groundbreaking, and I think we talked about this today or yesterday very well. Just because a campaign, an ad, a partner has high viewability doesn't mean it's necessarily successful, doesn't mean it's capturing the user attention. If we think about MRC and IAB, the guidelines, it actually says it's the opportunity to be seen, right? Viewability is the percentage that your ads have the opportunity to be seen, not necessarily seen, engaged with, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on high viewability partners, high viewability placements. That's great, right? That's our starting point, but we can't stop once we have high viewability. That's really just where we kick things off. I don't think I'm going to go too much into this. I think we all understand and know these very well. Just to level set where we're at, though. We have the MRC, and then we have Group M. And I want to clarify that we don't work with the Group M agency right now, but I really like that these big holding companies are pushing the standard, right? They're trying to make things better. They're making stricter definitions, pushing advertisers, pushing partners to strive for more. So in preparing this presentation, I didn't want to cherry pick sites, but I did want to find some examples of everyday sites that we go to as just a level set of where we're at. And I masked the names, but especially if you're in the Northeast and you like sports, or if you're anywhere and you like weather, you'll start to see some examples that these are not little niche sites that no one looks at. These are major sites. I've highlighted all the ads for ease in red. We're just going to go through. Anybody from New England? I know a few. Okay. Can anybody tell what site this is? All our favorite, slowest website in the world. And then cool, weather. So how does this look, right? How does this stack up against viewability? What we want to understand is, again, do these sites have, or do these publishers have a strong opportunity to be seen by our consumer, right? Do we give our creative a fighting chance to be noticed and then actually do creative's job? Perhaps, right? But also perhaps not. And if we look at the MRC scorecard, if we're looking at viewability based on their definition, we're at 100%, right? Every single page that we just saw, we were on it for a second, they were all in view, or at least 50% in view, 100%. So typically, again, we're all very busy, we're all doing optimizations. If you see a site or a partner that has 100% viewability, you're probably moving along, right? You're not going to spend too much time worrying about a site that had 100% viewability. That's what we want. If we look at Group M, again, this definitely was a little stricter, so this does give us a better indication maybe of based on their definition, but still 60% is higher than the industry benchmark. So again, if you're just benchmarking against industry standards, maybe for your brand this might not be too much. The problem is though is that if we just use the MRC or the basic definition, we wouldn't investigate it more. So while viewability is strong, what we wanted to do outside of our down-the-line performance metrics, ROAS, all of that, we wanted to use a couple other proxy metrics to help us dig into attention and the attention garnered from our advertising. So the first is a metric. It's colloquially known in view time, but it's really the exposure time that viewable ad had on screen. So it's good because it disregards any non-viewable impressions and it only looks at those viewable impressions. And then two is the universal interaction rate. Most people don't click on banners. That's long. We all know that. But for certain units, certain rich media, certain experiential pieces, maybe gaming, you will see that looking at some sort of engagement rate in a relative sense, right? Not pure absolute, but looking at it relatively is a helpful indicator sometimes. So this is we're going to jump back into our data set from our audit. And this was the top 5 placements or publishers, sorry, from a recent campaign we ran. So this is all live data, obviously masked the websites. But really quickly, we see some standouts, right? If we look at just viewability standpoint, we see website 1, 2, 78, 82%, that's great. We also see some pretty poor websites performing, right? 54% viewability, 38% viewability. As a budget owner, if you see that a major publisher, you're wasting 60 cents of every dollar you give it, you're gonna be a little upset. Finance procurement, they're getting a little bit smarter too. So if you do these large partnerships and they realize 60 cents of every dollar is going to waste, that's an issue. So we wanted to look, well, the other thing to keep in mind too is if we go through standard optimization techniques, right? Again, we're very busy. We don't have a ton of time. Maybe it's algorithmic. You'd probably want to cut websites 3 and 5, right? That's kind of a no-brainer. Site list optimization is a big thing. We'd also probably want to put websites 1 and 2 into a high viewability whitelist, right? These are kind of all-stars from a viewability standpoint. As long as the performance metrics are doing well, cool. When we look at our in-view time, right, an additional proxy metric, additional metric for attention, we see almost the exact opposite. And again, this is nothing too crazy, but it was very interesting for us that our website, Publisher 2, 82% viewability, had only 12 seconds of in-view time per ad. And what we also saw is website 3, which was, again, that was going to get cut right away, had 37 seconds per viewable impression. And this is really important data. While we can go back to the publisher and say, listen, website 3, we were going to cut you off the plan, right? This is bad. But we know that the ads that are resonating with consumers, or at least they're engaging, are on screen for a long time. And again, we just want opportunity to be seen, right? We want the opportunity for our creative to do its job. So this is very helpful. The other piece to consider as well is, we've been harping about viewability for 5, 7 years or so. Media planners, when they go to a publisher, RFP, and they're saying, hey, we want 70% viewability minimum, right? We're not going to pay for under 80% viewability. And the good thing is, as an industry, the publishers have listened. By and large, a lot of these modern publishers have updated their sites. They've revamped their advertising, their monetization strategy. They have high viewability placements that they sell at a premium, right? The issue becomes, if we're selling these just for the sake of viewability, right? We're not looking deeper. We're not taking a step back and really understanding what we want this to do. What we end up doing is paying a lot of money, right? We would whitelist or maybe double down on website 2, and then we'll see that our downstream metrics, our downstream performance isn't resonating, right? It's not working. And we have to understand why that's not working. So this is really helpful. And so again, this is not something you can do across all your publishers, your DSPs, you're serving across thousands of websites. But if you are running Publisher Direct, or if you look at your site list from your DSP and you see some standouts, right? You really want to take an extra step and not just say, hey, okay, viewability, cool, cut it, boost it, whatever. Really take a little bit more detailed approach and dig into it a little bit more. Cool. This leads us to, So when we roll these out to regions, right, we're rolling this out, we're a global team. We ask our regions, and maybe something you guys can think about or jot down as actionable items. But 1, do I know the viewability and relative CPMs for your major publishers? 2, for those sites with high viewability, are you confident enough that that alone is the right metric to measure attention? Cool. Second groundbreaking statement. I'm not going to win any awards on this, but not all platforms are the same. They require tailored content. As publishers try to make more innovative ways to serve advertising and less intrusive ways to the consumer, what that's become is it's making the content that works on those sites more and more custom, right? A Snapchat ad is very different now from a TrueView. It's very different from a display or rich media. So we're trying to go in this direction, right? Most advertisers are, and we are seeing benefits and we are seeing progress, but we often face 2 hurdles. 1, production costs, right? We have a finite budget. We can't spend 80% of our campaign budget on creative and 20% on media. So that's kind of a hard stop. The other, though, is creative pushback. And quick raise of hand, does anybody have experience kind of pushing back from media versus the creative teams? Right. So this is kind of a common thing, right? Creative says, no, we're storytelling, right? This is deep emotional. Media, we're like, hey, we're performance, like we got to get shit done. So this is really where we can take this thing like viewability and actually help these creative discussions by building a data story around how our consumers are engaging with our content. What I really like about this is, I'll jump to this, but it removes the ego. It removes the subjectivity from creative discussions, right? It's not me saying that this creative is bad, let's say. This is what our consumers are saying, so we have to listen. So this time we took a look at the data. We looked across all platforms. Didn't matter what market. We aggregated it all. And we saw Instagram was clearly in trouble. So I'm not going to compare Instagram in-feed placements to open web. Very different consumer experience, very different. I'm not going to beat myself up that we're not at the benchmark. But we do need to understand why is viewability so much lower in social and understand what we can do, if anything, to control it. So we look at the definition again, where at least 50% of an ad is in view for at least one continuous second. 50% of an ad, Moat provides a data point called pass-through rate, right? What percent of your ads or how much of your ads were in-screen throughout the whole viewfinder? Great. We're doing awesome. We're near 100%, so almost every ad is going through the screen. Then we look at the one continuous second part, and we were a little shocked. I love this baby. He's freaking out. This is kind of my reaction. So it was pretty shocking. The numbers were not good, and we got scared. So we looked out, and we wanted to see if this was us or if this is an industry issue. And what we see is this is recent research from Facebook and Oracle. They look at the scroll speed across the different demos. Are younger people scrolling faster or slower? And what you can see, unfortunately, if you're a brand also going after Gen Zs and millennials, which most people have a target for, they're scrolling really quickly. Fast was defined as less than 2 seconds. Slow was defined as over 2 seconds. So this is kind of the industry. I reached out to my team. I asked my wife, please, hey, just send me a video of you scrolling through. It's a very small focus group, right? We have a focus group of 4. But I don't think you need expensive research to understand how consumers are engaging with Instagram, let's say, this topic or this platform we're looking at. People, whatever the research says, and I'm sure you all agree, you're not looking at each post, watching the entire video, reading the caption, engaging, absorbing it all, and then move to the next, right? We spend enough time on Instagram. You'd take days, right, if you looked at every single post. It's fast, it's erratic. This is, it might be a little bit biased, but, some of you might be on Instagram right now. This is the average kind of consumer, especially in that younger demo. So what can we do about it? Megan Troth from NBCU recently said a good line, the attention economy is a cruel mistress, takes no prisoners, get their attention in 6 seconds or not at all. Advertisers, we know we need the right timing, right message, right person. But what happens if the user scrolls past your ad before right message, right timing, right targeting even gets into play, right? What can we do? So this is, again, not new. It's brought up a pretty cliche term of thumb stopping, right? How many people are trying to make thumb stopping creative? Has anybody heard thumb stopping? 2? Yeah, there we go. Which is great, right? We want the user to stop on our ads. I'm not going to go into thumb stopping creative. I don't know how to create thumb stopping creative. That's not my job. My job is really to help our creative team really understand what parameters they have. And so the question is, how much time do you have? How much time is thumb stopping? How much time? Is it 6 seconds, like Megan Troth said? TrueView provides you 5 seconds. Facebook is saying 3 to 5. How much time? Again, it's not my job to tell creatives how to do their job. My job is to inform them with the right data. So we look back at our data set and based on our audit. And so what you're seeing right here is every single Instagram ad we ran across all of our different markets, over 70 plus countries, different agencies, right? We have our creative AOR, we have in-house teams, we have media partners providing us. And what we're looking at is this 1 second fully on-screen rate, which is the x-axis. It does also correlate partially with fully on-screen time, right? Which is good. And after doing a little bit of data scrubbing, most data sets are kind of noisy, messy, scrubbed out low impression ads, we really came across these outliers, these true outliers. And this isn't due to a data discrepancy, right? This isn't one ad that had 1 impression and someone sat on it. This is really over thousands and millions of impressions. And so, again, going back to those creative conversations, our job isn't, again, to say this looks good, this looks bad. I have my personal opinions, but it really doesn't matter what my personal opinions are. And realistically, the creative director, it doesn't matter what her personal opinion either is, right? That could get a little controversial, right? Creative directors are known, that's kind of their thing. And they're usually much better than media folk. But by looking at aggregate data, we can start to identify common trends. Not saying that one ad is going to create a learning or a lesson, but if we look at 5,000 Instagram ads and we look at 100 million impressions, we can start to kind of see what some top-level trends are. So what we saw from this quick audit was if we look at our product shots, right, we see that simple product close-ups across contrasting gradient backgrounds seem to do well. I want to call out that ad on the left, it's our Asics Tiger Brazil, is intentionally like 90s retro, so that's kind of why it looks kind of ridiculous. But that was kind of the campaign, so it's a throwback shoe from 1990. And then if we look at our lifestyle, anybody in this shoe game, Keen, I don't know if maybe this works for you, but we see this from Nike, we see this from Adidas. This kind of focused foreground shoe being held by a person with this background is something that we see across all the brands. So we know that this resonates, right? This is eye-catching. This is somewhat thumb-stopping. And so again, these are the type of conversations we have on a periodic basis where our job is the media, right? We're running the media, but we're also analyzing the data and giving that back to the creative team so that they can use this type of data to better inform their future creative decisions. So how quickly am I capturing attention? First question. Second is, of those people that I'm capturing their attention, how long are they engaging with my content? And lastly, I know we're running up on time a little bit. Yeah, we'll wrap it up. Engagement, heavily nuanced by platform. We look at viewability. Here, again, we realize viewability is not a great metric for video. So what we want to look at, we take a step back, very simple. How long are my ads? How long are people watching them? Right, pretty simple. We try to follow some best practices, right? Social is shorter. Okay. Which leads us to this. Well, as we can see, obviously from the red line, the discrepancy between the red and the blue, we still got some work to do. So we took a step back, and we looked at these 4 factors of our creative success, or what we need to champion. Historically, advertisers have said, all right, I have a campaign, I have an audience, I know what I'm going after. And if you're at a large corporation, sometimes creative is done centrally, somewhere in a different region maybe, and then those assets are distributed. You kind of fit the assets where you can. Sometimes it's like fitting a round peg in a square hole. But that's kind of how it's sometimes done. And what we really need to understand is we need to understand the platform offering, and really the most important is understand how consumers are engaging with that platform organically, let alone paid, right? Why is a consumer going to Instagram? How are they engaging with content? And so I'll go through some really quick, harsh examples of how we learned this the hard way from a recent campaign. And this was the first one. This was a campaign, video campaign, we ran across screen. And so viewability is a topic, but audibility, especially in video, right? That could be 50% of the creative, right? It's both visual and audio. And this was pretty harsh. This was a tough pill to swallow. What we see is the audible rates over quartiles. For YouTube, pretty good, right? We started at about 80% listening, drops down to about 50. Social, I'm not going to go into the exacts, but as you can see, those are all very, very low lines. As you can imagine, our creative team was not happy to hear the hours and hours of work they put into creating a great audio track that goes with a great video was essentially never listened to on social. Next lesson, this is again pretty, people have seen this, but what we found again against this campaign is regardless of the ad length, whether it's a 15, a 30, a 60, consumers aren't watching more than 10 to 15 seconds. We know as creatives, we're trying to put the message up front, cool, but every once in a while you'll have a creative say, no, listen, this is a great storytelling piece, right? This is a strong 60, made for mobile, made for our consumers. And honestly, they seem to not care too much, right? The platform usage is really not to sit here on social or Facebook feed stories and look at it for a long time. And lastly, this kind of nuance is also very seen at a regional level too. So there's no one size fits all of what works. You really have to dig in deep. And so this was those same videos through our social listening platform, and saw where are we seeing that engagement from a comment, share, like, repost, etc. So you can see very different regional nuances. And so this is the type of thing that we have to do to continuously increase our channel strategy, our approach, our campaign success. So here are the considerations, or the questions to consider are, what are the opportunities, right? But just because there's an opportunity, right? Social video has audio, right? That's enabled. Does that mean that you should run there? Does that mean you should expect a strong audio performance? Maybe, maybe not. What kind of content do our consumers expect on this platform, and how do they interact with it? And then lastly, how do my brand assets fit across this medium, and how do we add value to this platform, not be an intrusive thing that you waste a lot of money on? It's kind of wrapping up. I know people are saying social is getting more expensive. It is. But also you think about it, no one's actually looking, or a very small percentage of your audience is actually engaging with your social ads. So that might be a reason why it's getting quite expensive outside of whatever Facebook's doing. So in closing, viewability, as much as we want to go beyond it, right? It's an old topic. We have a much more exciting things to go through, a lot of cool stuff going on. It's still an important factor. It's still something we need to consider, but it's not the starting point. And just because you have high viewability or just because you have a mandate 80% viewability doesn't mean you can just check the box and forget about it. You have to dig in a little bit deeper and look at some additional metrics to understand how are our consumers paying attention to our assets. And then lastly, we can use viewability and other attention metrics derived partially from viewability to really help craft more meaningful campaigns, right? More smarter channel strategies, better conversations with the creative, and overall increase the overall success of your campaign. Thank you. Hope I didn't
Excellent. Philip, that was great. Thank you so much. Any questions for Philip?
Uh-oh.
Hey there, Philip. On one of your slides, you had a top 5 websites, and you were showing viewability. By what measure was it top 5? Is it spend? Is it impressions?
That was spend and impressions. So we look at where, some of it was publisher direct, so that's kind of a flat CPM sometimes. Others were programmatic. We all see Weather Channel very high. Weather Channel wasn't one of those, but similar, right? You look at your top.
James Blaney, BB Clark and Myler. Actually, on the same slide that Alberto was just mentioning, you had viewability and then in-view time.
Yep.
And the in-view time contrasted or conflicted with the viewability data.
I don't know if it's going to go through. Yep.
The next metric, cost per transaction or return on ad spend, how did they all correlate? Or was there any correlation between viewability and cost per order?
Yeah, so that's where we get into the tricky situation where sometimes a campaign does very well and you have 42% viewability, right? Like, how does that work? I think there's something wrong in that equation if it does work, right? If you're wasting 60%, you're actually, or 50%, let's say, to keep the numbers simple, you're actually doubling the cost, right? A $10 CPA at 50% viewability is actually a $20 CPA, right? You could either get more scale if you had higher viewability up to a certain point. I get it. But there's something wrong, and we need to work on it. We need to try to get past it.
So is it a combination of viewability plus in-view time that may guide you towards a certain more optimal CPA? Like, is it 60% viewability with 25 in-view time, or is...
Yeah. So again, viewability starting point, right? This 54% viewable website with 37%, the 54 is pretty bad, right? We're still wasting a lot of dollars, but we know that quality is there if you can reach it. So we don't have exact numbers, right? Again, I'm not mandating 90%, do it, right? But we need to get viewability high enough to it's a starting point and then try to go for in-view time. And we've correlated in-view time with success. So that's been our driving metric. Again, all about getting that attention, right? Getting our creative to do the heavy lifting.
Philip, that was, it sounds like a lot of this, and certainly this slide impressed me as really underscoring we need to really rethink and reassert the importance of context and understand where this stuff is happening and why you would see this kind of variation. If this the sort of context that publishers are building, and of course programmatic very often doesn't give us that visibility into the context. Philip, that was great. Cool. Thank you so much. We're going to actually, let me ask Jeff to come up. We're going to keep the focus on shoes and social. Jeff Snow is the Senior Social Media Manager at Keen Footwear. For those of you who are not familiar with Keen,